Hi, my name is Tristan Malu. I am the communications manager at Bethel in Richland, Washington. Kind of essentially to explain my job would be I help our church communicate well and specifically finding channels of communication. Like I don't necessarily dictate what our church communicates, but how we communicate, the manner in which we communicate, and how that information gets out. What channels are we using to communicate? I've been in this role for almost 4 years. I've been on staff for longer, but specifically in this role for about 4 years. And it has been really cool to experience like growth in this because I didn't go to school for this. I wasn't formally trained to necessarily do all the tasks that I have. And so it's been cool to grow in the role and grow in responsibility and learn things as I go. A lot of what I do, interestingly enough, is very task-based. I'm getting stuff done, I'm making a graphic, I'm making sure, the right thing is created and placed in, we have a newsletter that goes out every week. There's stuff that kind of has to happen, and that's my job to get that done. And so I enjoy task-based work, but I also acknowledge that as a leader in the church, my role is to help the church, which is people. And so if I'm just sitting here the whole time just thinking about tasks, and I do struggle in this area, honestly, is like, oh, I love the tasks, I love doing that, but the people are why we exist as a church, right? I want to be able to equip people to do the work of ministry, but there's just a lot of tasks in what I do. So it's that balance of knowing, okay, what does it look like to get something done because it needs to be done, and what does it look like to call people into volunteering or serving. And so, one of the ways I'm doing that right now is through like a photography team. I'm slowly building that team and wanting to be able to help people show up in their giftings, even if they don't necessarily have the gift of photography, be able to show up and learn that and get better at that. And that's something that I get to do specifically in my role. Outside of church, I do try to draw boundaries in just the season of life that I'm in the sense that when I'm doing a task, I want to be clear, is this within my job or is this for something else? I want to make sure that what I'm doing is in the right timing and that God has called me to it. Not just to say yes to something because, oh, I'm free tonight, or, oh, like I have this gifting, I might as well use it. I used to kind of have that mindset. I think there's a good balance there in knowing when and where to use your gifts. I feel like God has called me into a season of just not saying yes to everything, and yet God can call us to more outside of that or through the gifts that He's given us. And so just knowing that God has given me gifts, I want to use them and say yes as much as possible, while also acknowledging that I can't be everywhere and God hasn't necessarily called me to all these other different things, but to really focus my efforts and focus, what I'm doing, and that helps me because I can be paying attention to what God is doing here in the local church that I'm a part of. Yeah, there was a season in the past, and kind of my role was tied up in this a little bit, where I had a lot of free time and I wanted to use it, and I felt kind of guilty if I wasn't using my gifts with video or communications. If I wasn't leading a group, like I feel like God has given me leadership abilities. And so I had this desire to lead, like a young adults group. And there was a time where I was just saying yes to everything and I was burning myself out. And so God has really taught me a good balance. And I think sometimes that pendulum swings one way or the other. Like I might look back on this season in a couple of years and go, oh, I could have been more faithful with my time. And so maybe there's a movement back towards doing more. But I've just been in a season now where I'm saying yes to bigger things that are over time, and being obedient, I guess, in the being in my gifts, and not always feeling like I have to just do. So video has always been my passion, and when I got hired here at Bethel Church, that was my role. I was the video guy. I got to work full time and just focus on videos. And then as time has gone on, I made the transition into communications. And so video is still a part of what I do, but there's just so many other, like I said, communication channels that I get to be involved in. And so, yeah, in the past, I spent a lot of time doing freelance video and, doing outside video work. And I really enjoy that. I do less of that now because I really want to be leaning into the work God has for me here. And plus, I love what I do here. I think it's important to recognize the seasons that we're in and to know that, like, just because we did something in the past, or maybe God is going to call us to something in the future, doesn't dictate the now. And if we're connecting with God and being present with God, growing in our relationship with Him and abiding with Him is going to lead us down the path and doing the things that He wants us to do. God may call me to something really big one day. He may call me to just maintain what He has. Maybe that changes, maybe it doesn't. I'm just kind of open to whatever He has. Right now, I find it easy to find rest in the sense that I have time and my schedule is pretty open, and I don't know, I'm married, don't have any kids. My obligations are minimal in the sense that I can say no to things pretty easily and not a lot of people get impacted. And so being able to say yes or no to things, make decisions, hey, let's go on a trip, let's do this, that kind of a season is really cool because you can make those decisions pretty quickly, or you can plan something out in advance and execute on it. Where I find it difficult for rest is just in my own habits and patterns, and acknowledging, like, hey, is my screen time really helping me rest well? And knowing, well, okay, the answer is no. I already know that. So what does it look like to grow in, whether it's discipline or just space from certain types of social media or certain types of screen time? Things like that, I think, are really key to being able to be connecting more with God and being less distracted, and finding rest through the things that are actually restful. Yeah, when life gets overwhelming and I know that I have responsibilities, whether in my work, my marriage, relationships, like things that, whether I feel like people are counting on me or just things that I've said, hey, I'm gonna do this. But when I'm feeling overwhelmed in that, I think there is actually a deep underlying sense of safety and security, knowing that God cares about me, He cares about the details of my life. And it doesn't mean that everything's gonna work out always or that things are gonna be perfect. But it does mean God is with me in it. I just have a deep sense of safety. I think that's really key, like psychologically. I feel safe, even when I get flustered, even when I get overwhelmed, even when I feel like I can't do this or I'm being asked to do something that, I'm just like, I can't do it. There is safety to know, like, big picture in my life, I can trust God and know, like, okay, I'm gonna be okay, things are gonna work out. I think part of that is just trusting God in my journey, like seeing what He's brought me out of, what He's brought me to, like even the things that I didn't know to ask for, God has provided. Success in ministry, from my experience, has looked like faithfulness and consistency. Even the question a lot of people ask in ministry, like, are you able to heal in place? Are you able to grow in place? This idea of, like, is your environment conducive to the growth that God might have for you? And I have been fortunate enough, or however you want to look at it, like God has just allowed me to be able to experience difficult things and grow out of them and grow through them in seasons where ministry dynamics have changed, leadership has changed, staffing has changed, ministry models and all of that has changed. Been able to just show up and say, what has God called me to, despite the changes that are happening around me? What does faithfulness look like? And So that's been a huge part of my story, but God has just consistently called me to show up. And so that has been my experience of success, and I think what success has looked like for me in ministry. What does it look like to show up and be consistent, be reliable, and not through my own strength and not through just like gritting through it, but through God's grace and God's providing for it, and just trusting in Him to show up when I bring my gifts. He's gonna bring the rest. And so that's what I hope to do.